Hello, and thanks for joining us today. Super excited you could be here because today we're talking about making sales, and this is like the essential thing you have to do in your company. And when you get past the point that you're making sales, then you're going to want to know what we're going to be diving into today for your sales team members. Look, it all comes down to sales and conversion. You can get all the leads in the world, even if you figured out that part of the puzzle. Converting those leads is what brings in the money. So we've got to make it happen. And to make it happen today, with us is Glenn Poulos. Now, Glenn is a seasoned sales leader and entrepreneur with over 4 decades of experience. He began his career in 1985 as a technical sales rep and quickly found his passion in cutting and customer-facing roles. Now, in 1991, he founded his first company, Wave Technologies Incorporated, and later served as president of I might mispronounce this, Anritasu Electronics Ltd. for 9 years. In 2007, Glenn founded Gap Wireless, which became a leading distributor of mobile broadband and test and measurement equipment markets. Now, he actually successfully sold the company to NWS back in 2022. And throughout his career, he has spent thousands of hours in the field working closely with customers and mentoring sales teams. Now, his hands-on experience has given him a deep understanding of what it takes to start, scale, and succeed in business. Now, Glenn is particularly passionate about sales strategy, customer behavior, and emotional drivers behind decision-making, and which has helped him create and lead several successful businesses. Now, Glenn is exploring new opportunities to share his expertise with the world, right? And so, whether through collaborations, podcast appearances, or speaking to a sales team, or his book, Never Sit in the Lobby, he brings a proven results approach. In his personal life, Glenn enjoys hiking, skiing, and playing pickleball near his home in Toronto, Ontario. And he also spends his time down here in Florida by me as well. Glenn, what's up, man? You've done a lot of cool
Hey,
stuff.
Ty. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for that great intro.
Yeah, so I think we were talking before we jumped in, and I think you've got a bunch of steps in your book, Never
Yeah.
Sit in the Lobby, about making sales. But let's start here with there's something that's called the WSP method. Can you give me some more insight about what this is?
Yeah. Winning sales presence. So in a way, it's kind of like a bit of a metaphor or something like that. And so a lot about what I talk about in the book is how to get, act, and stay in front of your customers and to be a pleasure to do business with always, right? And so, one of my huge tenets is like don't be a pain in the ass, right? Like you don't want to be that guy, right? And where, it's like, oh, that guy's coming again. Like, they run the other way, right? I mean, because I sold to big companies and still do, in fact. And, we tend to visit those customers repetitively. It wasn't just once, one and done kind of a thing, right? And so, even if you lose a deal, you want to get invited back. Right. And so it's good that, that's why I'm so, what would you call it, verbose about talking about, rapport and being a pleasure to do business with, literally, right? Because if you deal with big customers, you're going to be doing it over and over again. So the WSP is essentially the whole concept behind attraction is not a choice, right? And I mean, it's sort of a common saying out there in the industry, but more so when it comes to like sort of interpersonal dynamics, right? If someone's attracted to someone else, you don't need to tell them that they're attracted, right? And if they're not attracted to someone else, you don't need to tell them that either, right? And so, in other words, you need the trigger natural attraction triggers in your customers. And you do that by not doing certain things and doing other things, right? And that's the book goes into it in great length and gives some examples and what have you. But essentially, you don't want to be going in and pounding your chest. And we're the best in the business, and you're dumb if you don't buy our thing. And you really want to figure out a way of interviewing the customer during the dialogues that you're having with them to figure out what is it that they really need. Do they need something that's bigger, faster, wider, deeper, 20% cheaper, or whatever? And figure out all those things up front and not really brag about it, but just show your product in its most attractive light relative to the need that you've already determined the customer has. In other words, like for instance, we all love cars, right? And I mean, some more than others. I'm not, super passionate about them, but I'm kind of guy where I like the gadgets in the car, right? I like the adaptive cruise control and the auto steering and things like that, and a nice stereo. I like that it's peppy, but I don't really care how fast it is, right? And so, if a sales guy starts telling me, hey, get in this new car, this is 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds or whatever, he hasn't even determined whether or not I care about how fast I get to 60 miles an hour. I used to like 20 years ago and 20 tickets ago, right? But now at my age, I don't mind getting to 60 in a comfortable 6 or 7 seconds and staying, under the radar. But I like to see the fancier side of the car, right? The gadgets that make it special. And so it's up to the salesperson to figure that out up front and then present that to the guy. So it's like, oh wow, that's amazing, right? And that's showing them the winning sales presence. And it's what we call it, show them the WSP, right? Show them whatever it is that's going to like get them excited about the product. But in order to do that, you have to be doing your homework up front, right? You have to be figuring out what do these guys do, what part's important to them, and really that's the whole idea behind that chapter is yeah.
You ever see a show called Car Lot Rescue?
No, no,
It's
actually I've
interesting
never
you
even
say
heard
that
of it.
because like
Yeah,
this is a really obscure show where you see
yeah,
bar rescue and all that stuff like that. These guys
yeah.
go into car lots and they rescue
Oh,
them.
car
Yeah,
lot rescue.
car lot
Okay, sorry.
rescue.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay. No,
interesting
I
because
haven't seen it, but no, yeah.
there's only a couple episodes I ever saw,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because one of the episodes I saw hit on exactly what you just said, where they're teaching salesmen that you have to figure out, like moms don't care about speed, they care about safety. I'm not, that's a general,
Yeah.
generalization,
Right.
but and it's, I think it's interesting you say that because it reminded me of that show. I love the show. It's only 2 episodes I saw and then like it
Yeah.
disappeared. But here's the problem I have is that every sales team member I've ever worked with sucks at this. I mean, they are freaking horrible at interviewing. Like they just want to pitch. They just want to pitch. And it's
Right.
always where we get stuck because like the investigation is where you determine what you sell them. Are they qualified to buy? Should you even be talking to them? But no matter, even when we try to tell them, look, you shouldn't even be pitching this person. They're not qualified. They just want to skip this investigation step. So what do you find is the best way from somebody that leads sales teams to get their team to really dive in and dig in this investigation phase?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, a few things. So, one, I always lead with telling them that God gave them two ears and one mouth. So, you do the math, right? You should be listening twice as much as you're talking. Everyone loves the sound of their own voice, not particularly other people's voices, right? These are just sort of little golden rules that you learn along the way. And so, you definitely want to be listening twice as much. But I mean, and in the book, I spent a great amount of time talking about active listening and how you can practice that active listening. And there's exercises in the book that work both at work and at home, right? And I mean, one of the most sort of common stereotypes for men is that when they go home and their wife's got an issue, they never handle it correctly because they don't know how to listen, right? So the wife's like, oh, I had a thing with the neighbor. The dog was barking and she came over and she started snipping, snapping at me about the dog. And you immediately sort of jump in and start to try to give them a solution to the problem, to your wife's problem, right? And she's probably already solved the problem with the neighbor and she just wanted to vent to you, right? And so, through active listening, it's a series of techniques where it prevents you from really offering anything back to the person because you're really just acknowledging what they're saying by, oh, really? Okay, what happened? What happened next? Oh my God, how'd that make you feel, right? Things like that. And allowing them to get it all out. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that was important to you. Okay, what else can you tell me about where you're going to use that product? And you have to practice it. And so, there's a good exercise in the book where you can use it either with a customer or with your partner, spouse, whatever, where whatever they say to you, you can only say like 5 or 6 things like, oh, really? Oh my God. What happened next? No way. How did that make you feel? And those are the only sort of things you can say. And you're like, you can't have a conversation and say only those 6 things. I'm like, try it. Just force yourself to try it. And at the end, it's amazing how you'll see how people respond when it's genuine, right? And so that's my advice is like learn how to listen and practice the techniques in listening because that's really where the rapport is developed. And there's other stories in there about rapport, where a mistake I made where a guy had a fishing a photo of a fishing picture behind his desk. And I made some, kind of an asinine comment about, oh, we should go fishing. I love fishing, da, 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 whatever, right? And the guy's, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, that photo. And he's like, he says, oh my God. He goes, yeah. He goes, that's my my ex father-in-law. And he goes, and yeah, my wife used to make me go fishing with him. I had forgotten that it was still there. I hate fishing. I hate that guy. Can't stand my ex-wife. And grabs the photo, chucks it away, and I completely disreport the customer, right? I brought him to a place of, in his life where he didn't want to remember being with a person he never wanted to go doing a sport that he didn't like, right? And so what I should have started with is like, what's the story behind that fish you're holding up? Right. And again, he might have gone to that place quickly, but the point is to find out whether he really cares about fishing. Right. Another common one is where people that love golfing are constantly asking people to go golf, where they don't take the time to ask them if they're a golfer, right? It's like, oh yeah, we should go golfing. I got a membership at Club Links and this and that and whatever. It's like, I don't care. I don't golf. Like, as a matter, even the thought of golfing to me is like, like I just can't be that cooped up for 18 holes, right? And so people need to they need to be asking questions and finding out where people are coming from genuinely in order to establish rapport. Because when you're taking sort of you know uh, how do I want to say it, like when not taking advantage, but where you're assuming things with people, it really offends them. And it causes them to pull back and really not wanting to be interact, because it makes you look not genuine, right? And so yeah, so those are some of the ideas behind what goes into WSP and what goes into active listening and what goes into building the rapport, right?
Got 10 types of challenging customers. I don't necessarily know if you want to hit all 10 of them or not, but can you hit on some of these challenging customers, the types of challenging customers, and how we navigate dealing with each of those types? Not say you have to hit on the 10, but at least the most common ones we may see.
Sure, sure. So, there's like the aggressive customer, right? And they're loud, demanding, confrontational. They want things done now, and they're often verbally abusive and what have you, right? And so the, you know, you have to value your own self and your own time when you're there, and you have to, you need to be calm and firm and be professional, but you don't want to act in like a subservient manner in that situation, right? Where it's like your parents yelling at you and you're cowering down, right? You're just as valuable as they are, and your time being there for them is just as valuable as you there for their time, right? You might be saving them hundreds of thousands of dollars on their systems that they're deploying, or a new production line, or a set of equipment they're deploying. You may be more valuable than they are. So for them to be loud and aggressive, and it's really not in balance. And so you want to reestablish rapport in that way, and not accept it, right? And the indecisive customer, that one's very frustrating, right? Can't make a decision, tons of questions, then they second guess themselves, and they sort of need patience and guidance towards a decision, where you need to be finding out what it is they needed up front, and then guide them back to that decision that they originally said, and remind them, well, you said that speed was important. You said that, time was important, delivery or price was important, whatever the issue is, right? Depends on what product you're selling, you know. Um, the know-it-all customer, those ones can be frustrating as well. They believe they know more than the salesperson or expert, and sometimes they do, especially if you're selling technical or sophisticated products. This person might use this kind of thing, all day long, for the last 20, 30 years, right? They probably do know more than you, right? And they can be dismissive of your advice and your recommendations. And so I find it's best to double down on their knowledge then. So what can you share with me about it? And when you're going to be buying this product, what's going to be the most important thing, and what should I be looking for even when when I'm selling it, right? And sort of, drop into a role that allows them to mentor you for a few minutes and try to pull out what is most important to them, and I allow them to share some of their knowledge, right? Within reason, right? I'm not there for a university degree, right? Um, the complainer, they're never satisfied. They're always finding something wrong. They may have valid concerns, but sometimes they're exaggerating them. But a lot of times, those people just need to be heard and validated and, flush out what the real issue is and then look towards where the resolution might lie. Right. And again, they just want to be heard. Right. And so if I can just branch off, so that's like three, four, whatever. And there's the impatient customer, high maintenance, the entitled customer, etc. But there's a great story that's a true story in the book about where my co-sales guy and I went to. It was his customer, but he brought me along because we had a lot of vendors and I was kind of the expert on that vendor. And there were lines that he was the expert on and he would buddy up with me often and helped, so we didn't need to bring in a factory person or an apps engineer or something like that. Right. So we went to this customer and it was clear from the moment we got there. We had the instrument, I was setting it up. The guy's like, your stuff's no good. I want to buy this other product. We've been using it for years. And it was just like, and he was being very belligerent and kind of know it all and aggressive. And the most shocking thing happened at where the guy I was with, he kind of just got fed up, right? And he said, and he basically grabbed the power cord from about 3 or 4 feet back from the wall, and he just ripped the cord out of the wall. And he said, "You know what, Glenn? Let's pack this thing up. I think we should get going, right?" And the customer's like, "What's going on?" I was just in the middle of berating you about your product, right? And he goes, "It's obvious you don't want to buy our product. We're probably just here to keep you honest, keep the vendor you want to buy from honest. So just tell me what price it is you want me to quote you, and you can show that to your boss, and then you can go and buy the product that you want to buy. But we're not going to waste our time getting yelled at and abused by you when we feel we've got a great product." And the guy just completely did a 180. And it turned out, like that the product he was talking about was the one that the engineers used when they were designing prototypes. What we were selling them was the one that they needed for the production line where they needed to do it in volume, right? And so he said, "Okay, fine, let's start over. No harm, no foul. Show me your thing and whatever." And we were able to flush out it was for production. We were able to show him that our system was, yes, it was less sophisticated than the engineering one that he uses, but it was also 10 times faster. And it was significantly cheaper tool. And he ended up buying like 5, 6 of these boxes. And, and of course, it was a very dramatic. I probably couldn't pull it off, right? I probably couldn't rip the cord out of the wall and say, "I'm out of here." But what he taught me was the behavior, right? And so oftentimes I'll adapt that where I came up with a sort of a secondary rule from that, which is, lose quickly, right? I'd rather be last than second, right? Because the guy that comes in last gets to move on and sell to someone else. The guy who came in second is battling it out, probably in a deal that at his true heart knows he's not going to win. And he just wants to fight and fight and fight, see if he can win it, come from the underdog position or whatever. But a lot of times in a deal, you're not going to win the deal. Like there's a point that comes, it might be right at the end, or it might be 10% of the way into the deal. You know what? Like these guys are already signed a contract with the other vendor. They're not going to like go off program to buy my thing. They just want to keep the guy honest or whatever. And so what I'll do is I'll excuse myself as gracefully as possible and retract all my efforts. For instance, let's say he says, "You know what? We're looking at 3 or 4 boxes. We want to have a shoot off next week." And I'm like, "Oh, next week? No, no, no." I said, "My box is tied up for the next 4 weeks. So I can't keep these things on the shelf." "Well, if you can't bring it here next week, you're not going to be able to participate." Well, I already know I'm not getting the deal. And so I'm not going to go out of my way to come and deliver a box to demo to him, only so I can lose later. I just make myself unavailable. And then I race to my next customer before all my competitors can get there with me. And I find my next deal where I have a more highly probable chance of winning the deal. Right. And that's my whole rule. I'd rather be last than second because second really is just the first loser. Right.
Yeah, makes sense. Quinn, what about covering objections and actually closing sales? What's some of your best advice here?
Well, the so covering objections really is again, yeah, you have to think about it from the backwards way, right? Because you want to know that you're presenting the right product before you present it, right? Because I have a worksheet that I share with people. You can get it on my website. It's called the punch, perfect pitch, and close, right? And it's a scenario where when you're presenting the product, you want to start with a punch that grabs their attention. Then you want to give them the perfect pitch and the close. And by the time you get to the close, which is where these objections come in, the customers really should be telling you, like, how do I buy your product, what's the price, or what have you. And if they're not asking those kind of closing questions, you didn't actually present the product correctly, and the objections are really just an excuse, for them to extricate themselves from the situation, right? But if you've done the interviews up front, you've found out, hey, we need this much turn throughput, we need this much speed, we need this much memory, we need this much, handling, or whatever it is. You want to be determining and positioning your product so that you're showing them exactly what it is they need. Now, let's say they need, you sell the economy brand that's slow and, but it's reliable or whatever, but they need the one that's fast and this and that. You should actually be losing fast and move to the next deal and find a more appropriate customer, right? Because you're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. But I mean, so handling the objections, you got to be listening, not interrupting, let them get them out, sort of acknowledge, and validate their feelings. Oh, it's too expensive, right? And so, yeah, I understand. Yes, it's expensive, but expensive compared to what? Like what, and again, like it's expensive because it's faster. So, how important is speed to you guys, right? If we can do it 2 times faster, is it really more expensive, and when they specify objections, ask them to elaborate on them. Can you tell me more about that? And try to flush out the real reason behind the objection, right? And you typically want to be responding with value, address the objection directly, and reframe it by emphasizing the benefits and successes that your product has brought, perhaps, other people in their company or other companies that do similar things to them, right? And then you want to sort of re-acknowledge and move forward from those objections, right? And yeah.
Yeah, and you made a lot of references to basically mistakes that are kind of made by from the salespeople. But what do you think are some of the most common mistakes that you're seeing salespeople make that they can correct to be better at selling?
So So yeah, whenever you say that, I often want to just like go right to my rules on these are all the things to do so you're not making mistakes, right? And so, well, one of my rules, right, is never forget a face, right? So you're saying like, what is a common mistake? A common mistake is the sales guy forgets a face. So, and of course, the name of the book is never sit in the lobby, right? That's another rule. Don't make that mistake, right? In other words, don't go to the lobby, introduce yourself, and then sit down to wait for your customer because you often will find yourself getting distracted, and you could even get distracted to the point where you don't even notice the customer walking in. You know what I mean? The wife's like, "Oh, don't forget to pick up the milk and bread, and da da da. Don't forget we got the tickets to the play tonight, and be home early, and da da da. Oh, don't worry, honey, I'll be there." And the guy comes in, and you don't even notice that he's there, and he's towering over you, waiting for you to like wake up and realize that he's standing there. That's not a good look, right? And so that's why I never sit in the lobby. But before I get to the lobby, if I've called on that customer before, I check my CRM and I look at the names that are listed in that for that particular location or what have you, right? And I say, oh yeah, it's Bob, Sally, George, Paul. And I remember their faces, right? I bring their face to the forefront of my memory, right? And if I can't remember their faces, I'll go to LinkedIn and I'll look at their photo. And they'll say, "Oh, right, yeah, yeah. Sally's the redhead. Bob's the tall guy. Sam's the bald guy, or whatever, right?" And bring all that memory because your memory's good. It's just slow. And I mean, and if you bump into those people while you're trying to build rapport with a new guy in the building, and you forget that they're going to see that pause. Everyone's going to notice the pause, and even if you catch yourself We all know what that pregnant pause feels like when you've forgotten the name and you got to think back, and those moments are lost forever, right? The guy's like, I didn't remember my name, and he doesn't feel good, right? But when you do remember their name, they remember it for hours and weeks on end, actually. Oh, yeah, that guy came and he always remembers my name and he's always polite and he's great. He's such a pleasure to do business with. It's always nice to see him when he comes by, right? And and so the mistakes are, don't forget these things, right? Like, practice these rules of rapport and engagement that are tried and true, and don't not do them. Like, so, of course, I said it at the beginning, two ears, one mouth, right? So talking too much, like the worst thing is like, the guy's buying, whatever. It could be a car or whatever, right? It's like, and you say something about the word fast, and what you really meant to say was, I want to get through this deal fast. He goes, oh, our cars are so fast, right? And I mean, I didn't even get my, and you're just saying, you're getting through half through a sentence, and before you can finish your sentence, the guy's like, oh yeah, we do that, great, we do that, oh yeah, you won't even believe it, and then they go off on this tangent, and it's like, this guy's not listening to me, right? And you know, the biggest thing is a mistake is not researching the prospect and what they're doing, right? And you really want to figure out, and I always tell people that the best way to sell to a customer is to actually figure out how they make their money, right? What do they do? What do they make? How do they serve? What do they do, right? Are they a hardware company, a software company, a manufacturing company, a delivery company? Like, what are they? What do they do? Who pays them and why do they pay them? And what do they pay them for? Right? And then figure out why they're talking to you. Like, what does my product fit into the ecosystem of what they deliver to their customers? Because they don't care about your product, they care about their product and how your product can make their product better, right? Deliver it better, make it better, serve it better, and whatever, right? So by learning and taking notice of that, you can both, show the person that you're on the ball. It's just like researching companies before you go on a job interview. Like, oh, what can you do? What have you learned about my company? Oh, nothing. I didn't even check you out. I just showed up, right? Not a good look, right? But you can often sometimes, think of or find unique ways of opportunities. Like, when someone says, oh, what can you if you can't get into a customer, right? You want to talk to the engineering manager, the software manager, the IT manager, HR manager, whatever, right? The best way is call one of the salespeople, right? Say, hi, can I talk to someone in sales? When has a company ever said, no, you can't talk to someone in sales? Click, right? They will always and say, you know what? I've been selling you guys for quite a while. I had this great idea that so and so might be and I just wanted to share it with you guys. Oh, by the way, you know, who's the manager of HR these days, right? It's a reciprocity thing, right? Because salespeople, they're sort of, they feel sorry for you because they go through the same thing every day, and oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, they'll put you through or connect you to the person you need to connect to, right? And and so, it's sort of a way of getting past that. I can't find anybody in the department that I need, right? Um, so yeah, and so I talked earlier also about, you said about mistakes, right? So one of the mistakes is staying too long and not losing early, right? When you realize you've lost, you want to leave. But the other one is sort of giving up too soon, right? Where you're, oh, they're there, they're probably going to win. Like, you need to be unequivocal that you're losing the deal, like, you through one means or another, like a contract, a price, a delivery, a performance specification, a weight, a measure, something that you can't win the deal. That's when you leave early. Everything else is giving up too soon. You don't want to give up too soon, right? And yeah. So, and the other part is not starting high enough in the stack, right? And there's a great story in the book about a tow motor salesman who starts with the CEO and he works his way down from the CEO to the vice president of warehousing to the director of warehouses to the warehouse manager to the shop foreman, and to the warehouse supervisor, right? And all through all these people, but he started with the CEO, and the guy's like, I don't get involved in buying tow motors. But the reality is, these tow motors are $100,000 because they're, super whiz bang, huge machines, and there's no way he doesn't sign the PO. Like, he's the one that signs off on that kind of money. If it's the director that signs off on that kind of money, start with the director. You don't need to go to the CEO. So you need to figure out, hey, I sell a thing that costs 10 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, 500 grand, $1 million, and then figure out in the business that I'm calling on with 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, who signs the final thing for the things I'm selling at the price I sell them at, right? And start with those people and get pushed down the ladder, right? Like, oh, I don't deal with that. Talk to Jack. He's the VP, blah, 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 right? And then you call the VP and it's like, oh, Jack, you're just talking to the CEO. He said, you really need to try out our new things and have a look at them, right? He's like, I don't deal with that. That's handled by the director. Call Bob, right? You call Bob. He said, I've been on the phone all day with your guys. The CEO, the VP, they can't wait to get our stuff into the bill. Oh, okay, fine. Well, I don't get involved in that. Call the supervisor, right? And then at the final thing, sort of the pièce de resistance is when you're delivering the tow motor to the warehouse to show the guys, right? You call the CEO and you say, look, I know you're not involved in these things or whatever, but man, we're turning on a dime. We're giving a nickel change. We're doing it 20% faster for 20% less energy. You need to pop down here and have a look at this thing. I know you're going to sign off on it. So take 2 minutes, come down. I want to show it to you. And 9 times out of 10, that person will come down to see $100,000 piece of gear that they know they have to sign off on. And then, that's how you won. And the whole idea behind it all and why you want to do that is so that at any point in the food chain, you can call those people and get their coaching, right? Like they're going to tell you, hey, you did a great job. You do have a much better system or whatever, but we're going to be going with something else for this other reason that's way beyond your control, right? The supervisor's not going to tell you that. The director's not the foreman's not going to tell you that. You got to get to the VP or the CEO or someone else that'll finally just say, "Hey, Glenn, you're cooked, man. You're not getting that deal, right?" Like we have to go with Kawasaki because we don't use Toyota's tow motors, right? And that kind of concept, right? So
Going great stuff today. We've talked about You Never Sit in the Lobby many times, your book. Where can everybody go to be able to learn more from you and then also to be able to grab your book?
So go to my website, glennpoulos.com, links to the book. You can do the downloads are there for doing presentations. And if you want to talk to me about any kind of concepts or, collaborate in any other way, you can just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there every day and looking forward to meeting new people.
Sounds good. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
So if you're watching this, go to glennpoulos.com. Now that's GLENNPOULOS.com. And if you go to Glenn's website and scroll down just a little bit, you'll see a picture of him and you'll see his social media links right there. So you can connect real quick. It takes less than a minute to do that. All kinds of really cool sales tactics that you're able to get that way. You're also able to learn more about him. You're also be able to access the podcast. And then you're also able to get the book right there. And it all happens in one place, which is glennpoulos.com. That's glennpoulos.com, GLENNPOULOS.com. Check it out right now. Don't forget to follow Glenn on social media and grab this book. I mean, we just scratched the surface. There's like 70 something tips and rules that he's got in there. We didn't even really cover most of that. So make sure you go grab that because that is a phenomenal tool that can help you sell more. It's called Never Sit in the Lobby. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. Have a great day.